Buenas tardes, señoras y señores. Soy la
Good
doctora
afternoon,
Mara
ladies
Gómez,
and
y tengo el
gentlemen. I'm
gusto de
Dr.
darle la
Mara Gomez,
bienvenida
and it is
al
my
panel
pleasure to
número
welcome
2,
you to panel number
titulado
2,
La justicia electoral ante los
Electoral
juegos,
Justice,
desafíos del dinero en la
Facing New
política.
Challenges of
Me voy a
New
permitir
money
presentarles
challenges in
al panel,
politics.
integrado de la
I will
siguiente
introduce the
manera.
panel.
En primer lugar tenemos
First
a
off, we have Armando
Novoa
Novoa Garcia,
magistrado del
Magistrate
Consejo
of the
Nacional
National
Electoral de
Electoral
Colombia.
Council of Colombia.
No se incorporará más adelante.
I apologize, he
Tenemos
hasn't
también a
arrived yet.
Tarcisio Viera
We
de
have Tarcisio Viera de
ministro del
Carvalho,
Tribunal Superior
Minister
Electoral
of
de
the
Brasil.
Superior Electoral Tribunal of Brazil.
Tenemos también
We also have
a Daniel Sobato,
Daniel
director
Sobato,
regional para
Regional
América
Director
Latina
for
y el
Latin
Caribe
America and
de IDEA
Caribbean
Internacional.
for International IDEA.
Y para presidir este panel,
And
tenemos
chairing
a
this session, we have Alejandro Avante Juárez, Magistrate of the Regional Chamber of Toluca from the Electoral Tribunal of the Federal Judiciary.
Cedo ahora la palabra al
I will
presidente
now
del
give the
panel,
floor to the
magistrado
chair
Alejandro
of the
Avante
panel,
Juárez. Adelante,
Magistrate
Gracias.
Juárez.
Buenas tardes. Pues es una mesa difícil, esta es
Well, this is a
como
difficult
una mesa
one
del hambre.
because everyone's hungry now.
Ya de pronto a quienes estamos en el panel empezamos a adquirir formas
The ones
místicas
here in the
de
panel
comidas
start,
típicas mexicanas,
we start looking at
eso
each
adquiere
other
cierta tragedia
like
para los que estamos
different
acá.
Mexican dishes,
Antes que nada,
enchiladas and so
agradecer,
on, because we're so hungry. But well, first of all, I would like to really thank
invitación a las instituciones convocantes,
the hosting institutions for
Daniel y
inviting
Tarcisio
us.
que
Daniel and
están en esta-
Tarcisio, I would like to
en esta
thank you
mesa, en esta oportunidad.
for this opportunity.
Seguiremos la misma mecánica que en las otras
And we will
mesas.
follow the same
Intentaremos,
mechanism as we had
recortar un
so
poco
far. We
por
will
las
try
razones
to,
apuntadas al inicio de esta exposición,
because we're a little
la
bit
duración
behind
de la
schedule,
mesa,
we will try to
a
reduce
fin de que
the
podamos
duration
concluir
of
alrededor de
the
las
panel so we can
2:30.
wrap up around
En ese
2:30
sentido,
p.m.
sin más preámbulo,
So
quisiera dar,
now, without further
mensaje
ado,
a
I
la
would
mesa,
like to
y para ello yo quisiera,
start with the panel.
iniciar con una
And
declaración.
first, I would like to start with a
La
very
política
important
necesita dinero.
statement. Politics
Una
needs
forma de
needs
hacer
money,
política
and one way
necesita
of
recursos
doing
para poder
politics needs
hacer una política
they need
efectiva.
resources
Y esto
to
implica
have
el
an
uso del
effective
financiamiento
politics, and
en
this
la
implies the
política.
use
Y esto es lo que
funding
vamos a
in
analizar
politics,
en
and this
esta-
is
en esta
what
mesa.
we will analyze in
A lo
this
largo
table.
del tiempo, el uso
Now,
del
throughout
dinero en la
time,
política
the
ha
use
adquirido
of money in
dimensiones
politics has
realmente
acquired
trascendentes. Ha
really
habido decisiones
important
de cortes
um,
muy
levels.
trascendentes.
There have
La
been
Corte
very
norteamericana,
important
pronunciándose sobre Citizens
caps.
United, por ejemplo,
For instance, the Citizens
libertad de
United
expresión
case in the
y
U.S.,
corporación.
freedom of expression and
Nuestro
corporation.
país
In
tuvo el
our
caso de
country,
un esquema de
we had the
financiamiento
case of a
paralelo en una
funding
elección
scheme that was
presidencial
parallel in a
que,
presidential
motivó
election
la
that
imposición de
motivated
una sanción, pero
the
además
creation or the
generó la puerta para que el tribunal como
the
autoridad
application of a
electoral
penalty.
iniciara
But also the
una
electoral
nueva etapa
authority
en la
was,
revisión
after that,
de
was able
el
to
financiamiento
start
de
a
la
new
política.
stage to review that
Pero el reto
funding.
es inexcusablemente cada día
But the
mayor.
challenge is without
Yo,
doubt
arrancaría
greater every day.
dejando unas
I would
preguntas
like to
propuestas
start
por,
with some
los
questions
organizadores.
proposed by the organizers.
¿Cuáles son los principales desafíos y
Which are the main
potencialidades actuales para el
challenges and
financiamiento
potentials
político?
for a political
¿Qué rol
funding?
desempeña la justicia
What
electoral en
role
reformas
does electoral
legales en el campo
justice
del
play
financiamiento
in the
político?
field of political
¿Cuáles son las
funding?
tendencias en
Which are
términos
the
de tipos de
trends when it
financiamiento
comes to
político
types
y
of
actores?
political funding and
¿Hay medidas que la
stakeholders?
justicia electoral pueda
Are
adoptar
there
para
measures
involucrar a la
that we
ciudadanía en
can
el
adopt
debate
in the
sobre mayor
electoral justice
transparencia en el
in order
financiamiento
to
político?
be able to debate more
Y sobre estas
transparency in
preguntas yo
political
quisiera
funding? And based on
añadir
these questions,
dos o tres escenarios
well,
que me
I'd like to
resultan
add
de
2 or
todo
3
relevantes
scenarios that I
para
think are very
utilizarlos como
relevant,
parámetros
so
para
we
la
can use them as
posterior discusión.
parameters for the
Yo
ensuing
quisiera
discussion.
preguntar,
I would like to ask you
¿cuánto
all,
vale un WhatsApp
how
o
much
cuánto vale un tweet?
is a WhatsApp
¿Y cuánto
worth,
vale
or
un
how
tweet
much
de
is a
quién?
tweet
¿Y
worth?
cuánto vale un WhatsApp de quién?
and a tweet from whom or a WhatsApp from whom. How much is worth? How much is an algorithm worth? If that algorithm can calculate that in my preferences, I sympathize with complete renewal of the government. How much is an algorithm worth if it represents me as a conservative? How much is it worth if I ask for an Uber at the same time every day? And how much is it worth to sell that information to a political party that can give me publicity or advertising that is attractive to me? So how much is it worth using the Despacito song in advertising? How much is it worth as an intangible value? And I don't have any problems in using it if then I will have a civil lawsuit with the authors of the song, and then of course I will be prosecuted because I breached that copyright. But I would pay 3 times as much if this is involved in a political process. And so we have to talk about intangibles in politics. How much is it worth to have the presence of a very a high-profile YouTuber in a political campaign? And traditionally, all the oversight systems in politics have been focused on checking the funds, the movement of funds in campaigns by using the financial system of a country. But what do we do with the coins that are not backed by any central bank and that don't go through any financial system? Today, Bitcoin, this morning, it had $74,000 per unit, so 144,000 pesos. That's the value of digital coins. But we must also be concerned because that digital coin 3 months ago was worth 60,000 pesos, and it's worth 144,000. So we are before not only a new way of doing politics, not only a new way to live both online and offline, but we're also seeing a new way to fund policies and politics. So this, we need to focus on this because first we have to be aware and get familiarized with the mechanisms to fund politics. And we must also know that everything that's used in politics is worth, and it has a cost as well. It has a direct or an indirect cost. And our third issue is the phenomenon of the recurrent clientelism and populism in politics. People promise in the campaign something that results, gives us a result, clientelist organization or a clientelist administration. So I would just like to open up the discussion with that, and now I will give the floor for up to 10 minutes to Tarcísio Vieira de Carvalho from Brazil. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers of this global event. I am very happy to be here representing Brazil, and I'm very happy to have dear friends here, such as Magistrate Carmen, Magistrate Patricio, who are dear friends of mine. I'm sorry, but I will speak in kind of Portuguese, kind of Spanish. I hope in 10 minutes you will be able to focus in what I say, and I apologize for that. But I would like to talk about the new challenges in Brazil. There has been a recent regulation in Brazil because up to 2014 the participation of business donations had been quite large, so that you have an idea, the 3 main presidential candidates in 2014 were funded 95% funded by business donations, 3% public funds, and just 2% donations from individuals. In 2015, the higher court, which acts in a constitutional way, and this electoral tribunal, now we have 3 participants from the High Court, 2 from the Justice Court, and 2 lawyers from the Supreme Court that are chosen by the President of the country. I am one of those that were chosen by the President, and we can be there for up to 8 years, with the exception of the ones from the Supreme Court that are there for 4 years. So there is respect from this Supreme Court regarding the decisions from the Electoral Tribunal, because the Electoral Tribunal, it's like it works together with the court. However, in 2015, during this 4560 process, the Supreme Court declared as unconstitutional the main system to fund campaigns in Brazil for business donations. So now we have to invest the pyramid, and that of course causes many problems. So that you can have an idea, in the elections of 2016, which were municipal elections, which were the first ones with the higher amount of donations from individuals, we saw a lot of irregularities, and there are some other studies that are available that we can see later, or we can talk about later, but so you can have an idea. Out of 712,000 donors, 680,000 have problems, have some irregularities. And these are really serious and severe problems, such for instance, more than 45,000 people that are donors are enrolled in a social program called Your Family that has people of very low income. However, they are donating 117 million reals. So either there is fraud in the social program or there is electoral fraud, and they both need the attention of the Brazilian state. 290 people were donors, and they were already dead. They already have their certificate. So these are new things that are happening. So this, there are 2 problems that arose from this. The need to increase the party-based fund, which has been increased by a lot, but it is still not enough for 2018, where there will be general elections held in Brazil. You are all invited to be observers there if you want to. And in October, just last month, another fund was created for the elections with an approximate value of 2 billion reales, just divided by 3 point something to get the amount in dollars. And our electoral tribunal, where we are producing the necessary resolutions to face these challenges, to control money that doesn't really have a flow that is complete, it's not fully controlled. We also check that there is a high presence of organized criminal groups in municipal elections especially. Many mayors were elected who had received funds from drug trafficking and organized crime. And another problem is that there is a strong presence from the church, evangelical church especially, that they have a lot of power to collect money that doesn't go through the official systems, the official control systems. So these are the challenges that is facing the tribunal now, and we need more than ever the experience of our brother countries and sister countries from Latin America. I don't know if I have some time left. I would just like to thank again the opportunity for being here and participating in this event. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Tenemos tres minutos de crédito aquí.
Thank you. You had 3 minutes that you had 3 minutes left, but that's okay. How much are 3 minutes? How much are they worth? Okay, so it's very interesting what Mr. Minister was telling us. This phenomenon of funding through criminal organizations or churches even that are getting involved. And even 290 people were donors once they were already dead. So this is important, and this shows us that we have a lot of work to do here, and we have undertaken a lot of efforts in managing and overseeing these resources, but this can be solved also with the topic of electoral integrity that has to get all the political stakeholders involved. Okay, so now I will give the floor to our dear friend Daniel, who now, thanks to Mr. Tarcisio, will have 3 more minutes. Thank you very much. I would like to start with something that has, it's closely related to what Alejandro was saying, that democracy doesn't have a price, but it does have a cost for it to work. I think that this is a starting point where we have to see if we agree or not. If we agree that democracy is priceless but has a cost for it to work, the second consequence is what Alejandro was saying. Money is indispensable, but it is also problematic. Hence, if it's indispensable and problematic, and assuming that there's no politics without money, but that the money can also erode or capture democratic politics, the real challenge is how do we regulate that money? So it's not a yes or no for money. It's not like a Hamlet dilemma, but we need money. The challenge is how do we regulate it properly? How do we regulate it properly with what we had as a challenge of money in politics, and like the chair of the table was talking about, with the new challenges? How do we pair those two? And now we have 2 challenges, because we haven't solved the old problems and now we have new problems. So here we really are in point 2 or point 3 when it comes to complexity. And for me, well, I have been working for 30 years in this topic, but for me this is really the core of everything. This is where we have the traffic of influence, conflict of interest. This is the real core of the matter. This is why it has been so difficult, and it will continue to be difficult. So we mustn't demonize money, but we need to regulate it to avoid all kinds of distortions. Lack of equity, like we were saying in the first panel. I have just come from Guatemala. I was working with Iván Velázquez, the commissioner from the CICIG, the International Community Against Impunity. In Honduras, the same. in Brazil, in Costa Rica. They have a cement-related scandal. And this, I mean, this, you can see it in Chile. Every country that I see is either in the middle of a scandal or it's about to come out of a scandal. The Panama Papers. There was another legal study that was produced in London, so we need to get used to that, but we mustn't just stay there in the scandals. We have to go from scandals to actions. And that has to do with the penetration of the money from organized crime. And this is a central topic because we have to condemn the simplistic policies. For instance, in Mexico, we say now parties will fund whatever they spend. Well, where would they get their money from? So there's two hypotheses. Either you had a lot of money and you pretended to be expended and you just put it in your pocket, or if you needed money before to campaign that way, if you don't get it from the public, you will do it. You will go to private corporations or with criminal organizations. So you are increasing the weakness of the system to fall into this situation of illicit funding. This is not something new, but it has been becoming more important, and it is something that it has been developing. And if you want to understand it with the paradigms from before, the old paradigms, it's just like when you want to read with your old glasses, with your old spectacles, you can't really see well. You need the new ones. So reality makes us change and to change our paradigm so we can understand it better. And it's very complex because it has to do with self-regulation, because the political parties are the ones that have to self-regulate themselves. And there's a big problem. In the case of Brazil, and it's not the only country, but I think it's the most important one. After all the crisis that Brazil lived and is living, that parliament, during many years, and actually right now even, they cannot reform themselves because they have to affect their own interests. But if we don't see Brazil and we go to, let's say, Spain, during years we wanted to do things with Spain regarding funding, and they used to say, "Oh no, we have that covered." And then we had the PPE and all these things, and these things will continue to happen. So this happens to everyone. And from Clinton renting the rooms in the White House, do you remember if it was the George Washington or the Lincoln Suite, so that people would sleep there and they would just pay their dues? And also the Japanese Prime Minister, that they would just cry in front of the TV acknowledging that they received illegal funding from large corporations, and of course they have to quit. Also South Korea, the traffic of influence, the former President Park, the owner of Samsung, the CEO of Samsung also so there are many cases. There was another one in Brazil, so this is something that's prevalent. And all of this has a negative impact externally because it is worsening the political crisis of democracy. It generates more cynicism, it generates more disenchantment, and it generates the image that all the politicians are corrupt and are the same, and that it generates this phenomenon of independent candidates because there's more customization of politics, which is greater exposure, because then the expenditures increase and anyone can buy a candidate because no one knows what's behind those smaller candidates. So we in International IDEA have been working a lot on this matter, and we will continue to prioritize it. We have two manuals. The last one is this one that Frank was kind enough to bring it here. We have a wonderful database with more than 180 countries with 43 variables, where you can see in those 43 variables what's moving around the world, which are the trends around the world. We provide technical advisory programs to those countries that want to move forward when it comes to reforms. I think with most of you, we have held seminars, but we are also proposing the need of moving forward with a new focus, a focus that doesn't have doesn't aim to just look after the activity of the electoral process, but also of the entire political system throughout its stages. So, to see when the money is coming in, how it moves around the political system. I think that's similar to cholesterol. There's a good cholesterol and there's a bad cholesterol. There's a private funding part, which is good, that we have to foster. That's why I think microfunding, small contributions, crowdfunding, there's all these things that are positive, but there's also the fat cats, these large groups that try to co-op. It's something that happened in Brazil as well. That also generates a vicious cycle. But we are proposing to link political funding and electoral campaigns with the fight against criminology and conflict of interest. So we have to connect it with many other topics, such as the lobbying laws, and this was the focus of a commission created by President Bachelet in Chile a couple of years ago. And we continue because out of the 16 members of that commission, the only non-Chilean that was invited by the president was myself. And based on that, we created that proposal. So let's link the political financing with a conflict of interest, corruption, and so on, because that is the core of the matter. In our database, I don't want to bore you, but you will see all the trends of the global trends, where we're headed and where the great trends are going when it comes to public funding and so on. And what you will see there is that every day it is becoming more important, and my first recommendation regarding this topic is that we need regulations that are more specific and more and smarter, because now we have regulations that most of them are okay for a checklist, but they don't solve anything. And when I give these talks, I always say, okay, who likes pasta? And let's say 15 of you raise your hands. I'm not solving anything, because then I will send you cannelloni. And then you might say, I don't like cannelloni, but you said you like pasta. Oh no, but I like spaghetti. Well, this is kind of the same thing. For instance, public financing. We all agree with public financing. But if we just stay at that level and we don't go to the micro stages, what type of funding, what combination of public and private financing, when is it given, who is it given to, in what proportion. If we don't see that, we're not solving anything. So we have to start moving towards that goal. For me, there are 6 strategic objectives that all good regulations need to have. 1, to guarantee equity, which we already talked about. 2, prevent private money from capturing, because it's not just avoiding private money, because a lot of people in Latin America are saying, okay, let's just ban all private money. But no, that's not the solution. We just need to see that it doesn't capture, it doesn't provide a state capture. Also, we need to prevent the penetration from illegal or illicit money. Number 4, we need to guarantee transparency by means of detailed, accessible, timely, and reliable information, and we need to guarantee informed vote. And we need political parties to send reports to the electoral institution so that they have 7 people in an office checking those documents, so that 2 years later someone says, oh, we found something here, which it's what I call the autopsy of the illicit, because the election has been done for for a while, and the penalty is useless. What can be done is, okay, technology is a risk, but it's also a great opportunity. What the INE is doing here in Mexico, online accounting, the log, the record of authorized suppliers. So technology, we have to use it as electoral bodies in order to achieve this. And this means that before you go vote, you have to see where the candidate is getting his or her funds, because maybe they're saying, oh, he or she is a candidate that wants to strengthen the protection for the environment, and there's two open-air mining companies that are funding him or her, and there's something fishy. And I also want to have information because chercher l'argent, you have to follow the money. Who gave that person the money, and that's where technology comes in. 5, to strengthen political parties. I don't have time. Can I buy more time? We need to strengthen the political parties, and we need to guarantee the effective compliance with the electoral institutions. So if we do all these things, and then we mustn't criminalize politics, but if we don't have a good penalization plan, including removal from office, which is the one that hurts. The other one, you can read Gary Becker, Nobel Prize of Economics, is cost of opportunity. It's like the goal that Maradona scored in the World Cup of '86 with a hand. Okay, welcome. I won the World Cup. So I would pay whatever you want. So without criminalizing, we have to have penalties. But in order to do that, we need institutions that have the authorities, because, of course, you have to have very good information. Now, that annulment cannot be the only sanction. There has to be different degrees. But we do have to have the possibility of a worst-case scenario. If things are done bad, you can have a penalty, cancel the registration of the political party. You can also remove that person from office. So the institutions have to have those tools. Thank you very much.
Very well invested 3 minutes. Daniel is telling us, as we have been saying, that we need money, but we need also the right regulation about this. We have not resolved some of the old problems. We have new problems now. And it's not about demonizing money. It's about preventing the state to be part of these not good practices, and to prevent the participation of the organized crime, and to assume a commitment, and to prevent the implicit policies which eliminate the money from politics, or that eliminate the possibility of making policy without money. There is an issue, and Daniel is mentioning about this, the corruption, which concerns many, not only Mexican people, but many inhabitants of Latin America, and these places under suspicion the entrepreneurs and also the politicians. That's why we have to renew this part of paying attention between politics and money. A very important aspect of what Daniel was mentioning is that we need second-generation regulations and not only a checklist, because this is not going to solve the problem. And at the end of the day, he was mentioning also the 6 goals and the possibility of strengthening a little bit more the punishments, the sanctions, and the possibility of losing their position or job. So along these lines, once we have heard all our panelists, we open now the floor for the debate. And eventually, I will be moderating our interventions in order to finish on time. We are going to begin with you, please, sir. Well, thank you very much. I want to mention that the funding law of a political party in Uruguay It's dates from year 2009, and right now, with part of the sanction, even though some of the chapters or the articles were already broken down, we are just about to approve. Well, at least I wish that it would be approved. I don't know if it's going to be approved, but we broken down a series of articles that are very polemic for certain political parties, and that we shall continue discussing them, and then it will go to the to the House of Representatives, and then it's going to be passed to the executive power. And I'm going to give you some characteristics that collect some of the statements that were said there. I think that this is a very good law. The Electoral Court was consulted because the Electoral Court has certain powers. It's not an open competence body. But the members of the Electoral Court have been consulted by the political parties very often. Even in the first discussion that we invited some of the members of the court for constitutional matters regarding the regarding the Senate. So this law is going to regulate the public and private financing or funding. In the public funding, there is a discussion about the percentages, because one percentage is going to go in function of the votes that the political party had obtained in the last national election. We are discussing which is going to be this percentage. It is admitted to have some private funding, but it is forbidden that some legal personalities, companies make the donations. They have to be individuals they want to make the donations. And they are going to account for these donations. They are going to have the accounting part of these donations, and they have to oversight and follow up these donations. Besides what we have already set forth about accountability in their periods where there are no elections, in the inter-election periods when they receive donations, they also have to register them in the Electoral Court. We also partially reform the media, the Act of Media, or the law for the media and the advertising, because it was adverted in one of the commissions that the media were charging different according to the political party and the political candidate. So a funding that didn't have control, and this was a factor that was distorting the feasibility, the possibility of the political party. So now, in this Electoral Court, we have an additional power. In case this law is approved, we are going to be in charge of hiring the time in the media with a unique fee, and we are going to distribute them according to the criteria that we also set forth. And we have a 5%, for example, for the new parties, etc., etc. The percentages don't take it very as a definite thing, because maybe in the next discussions we are going to revise them and we are going to modify them. But these are the basic criteria. We are going to create a fund for the contribution to democracy, which is going to be also funding or resources for the Electoral Court and also for the life of the political parties. And we set out a much more stringent regime regarding the transparency and accountability. And we set some cap amounts for the donations, of the private donations. And we consider as an electoral felony or crime those that are not complying with it. And the court is going to be also in charge of determining what are the punishments. We have not taken into consideration to remove them from from office. So I think that this is a bill of law which has very good intention, which addresses very important issues. So if, of course, we can do much more, but the important thing is that from a law coming from 2009, we felt the need of revising it, reforming it, and these are the fundamental ideas. And there is already a partial approval within the Senate. But the articles that were broken down, as I was telling you, are very important articles, so they have to continue the discussions. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Magistrate Alejandro Avante. I would like to congratulate the two panelists and our excellent facilitator and moderator for your participations. I would like to show a reaction to some of the things that you have been mentioning here, because I think that this matter of funding for democracy, specifically the public funding, is linked with this unlikeness that people have towards democracy that we have been speaking about since this morning. What we haven't yet defined very clearly is how expensive would it be, or how expensive is public financing, or how expensive would the private funding would be. Because what we think of as a parameter are the figures that the state provides to the campaigns, the political stakeholders, etc., etc. But we haven't really made enough calculations in order to know what does it imply to preserve these institutions, to prevent them to have these criminal activities, because they have more incentives in order to participate formally in the public decision-making process. So specifically, I think that this regime of possible sanctions in order to prevent this contamination between the unlawful and democracy drives us to some dilemmas that today some countries as Mexico are facing. Because obviously one is the option that right now was being mentioned by the magistrate from Uruguay. One is precisely the sanction via the criminal law. And here we are facing a problem. These criminal electoral offenses we have already regulated some years ago, but these are misdemeanors. So if the creators of the laws regarding these electoral offenses are going to be those that receive the same, they don't have huge incentives in order to set some huge sanctions or punishment, or to do it real and effective. So this is kind of a permanent simulation where we have to sanction, yes, but we have to sell all the facts that you have misdemeanors and they can pass. And whenever they are surprised with this kind of actions, they can go without any punishment. And the other thing is what Daniel was mentioning, which has to do nullity as a maximum sanction for the political system in general. So here, the thing about nullities is that who is going to be punished? The one that is punished is the voter, because if you invalidate or nullify an electoral process, typically the same parties are going to compete again. In our legislation, there is a hindrance where the one that is causing the nullity, I mean, the candidate cannot participate. But this is not the case for the party of that same candidate. So this has become a good business for political parties to breach the law. Why? Because no one, at least in Mexico, and I think that we have very few cases, and for really serious reasons, like the case of Spain with the Irribatasuna party. But if it is not due to a very serious cause like promotion of terrorism or something like that, the truth is that no one is willing to retrieve the registration from a political party because of this. So the political parties have a perfect estimation, and they say, okay, if I do this and they cut me, I can be fined or sanctioned, but through time I'm going to be able to recover myself. And how am I going to do it monetarily? With public financing. But no one is really concerned about this, because they are not going to be impacted or affected through an individual, their individual assets. And this is one of the things that we have really to change, because we don't have to dilute all these punishments because there are some instances on things that are not going to have these kind of punishments. So we have kind of a loop here, kind of a circle, a vicious circle regarding these funding issues. Are there any other comments?
Por favor, magistrado.
Please, Mr. Magistrate. Thank you very much. Enrique Figueroa, also from the Tribunal in Mexico. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you, the participants and the chair. I have a question for our guest, Mr. Tarcisio. To ask you, Brazil has lots of specificities which are worth of a very detailed examination. But if I don't recall bad, the electoral institution collects in one authority all the essential functions or powers that are related with the development of the elections. Mexico, for example, has this dichotomy, which is an administrative electoral theory, which is in charge from this electoral tribunal to the federal judiciary and other areas. So I would like to ask you, according to your experience, what do you think, or what's your opinion regarding the institutional model that would be optimal to address the funding issues for policy? For politics. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Magistrate Enrique. Brazil is quite a different case than other countries. We are like 200 million inhabitants, 144 million of voters with electronic, e-voting, and we have been building a system that which addresses almost all these. We have a higher electoral tribunal based in Brazil, and we have like 17 ministers and 7 that are substitutes. And we have a Supreme Federal Court, of course, these two courts, which are one court is more attributed for the infra-constitutional, and we have typically lawyers that are very experienced in electoral matters, and we have these kind of three different organizations for the president of the country. In each one of the 27 states of the country, which is a three-party, because it's the federation, the states, and the municipalities, we have a tribunal, which is a regional tribunal. So we have 27 electoral regional tribunals, one per state, and they are quite similar. We have two justice tribunals, two judges, first-degree judges. Typically, they are very experienced. And then we have a local tribunal, and then we have and they have to inform everything to the president of the country. And then we have the federal tribunal. There is a series of tribunals, which are 5. And the whole Brazilian territory is divided in 3,000 electoral areas, and these are occupied by concursal law judge. This model, which is justified by a high lack of trust by the electorate, which is attributable to judiciary power, because they have a much more trust from the citizens, and we think that we are a model which is a multi-skill model, and they also have positive aspects, but we also have a kind of concentration, excessive concentration of power, which goes from, which was traded, from this absolutism of the power of the president to this absolutism that we have now. So we think that we never want to have this again. So first, we have to pass for four different scrutinies. First, the substitute minister, the first government, the government of the president, the second government also has to scrutinize this, and they have to then go to the Superior Court of Justice, and so every moment it's possible to do modifications. So that's the beauty of this. If there are some claims, we can do many modifications. I don't know if I explained this, because this is a very difficult model, a model which encompasses lots of jurisdictional, administrative, regulative issues or facts, and which is a little bit confounding or confused, because we can respond to a consultation and then we behave according to the answer given or the response given to this dispute. But this has to do with the political reality of Brazil. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Magistrate Retana, please. Good afternoon. I don't want to delay more lunch, but I would like to make an observation that in our legislation, in our law in Costa Rica, it is very clear stated that the Electoral Tribunal regulates the funding. It also oversees all the funding of the political parties, and if it is proven that they were irregularities in the management of a campaign, the documents are transferred to the minutes to the DA, and there have been some cases that have had to pay some fines. Nevertheless, we don't punish the party, but the responsible of the fraud before the law. So it is true, we sacrifice the treasurer, but the party continues with all their credentials for the next campaign. I mean, there is a sanction for the party because there is the fine, but that's it. Maybe the party is going to held more responsible and is going to sacrifice the treasurer who was the one that was responsible, quote unquote, because they were receiving money from wrong sources or doing things that were not, or saying that they were doing things that were not done, etc. And the party continues working as is. And those that were sacrificed in this very moment is the secretary of the party, which is in office. I think that they are appealing before a superior court, a higher court, but they have this detention order. So because they used the money that they didn't have to use. That's why the party continues doing what they are doing, because they are only sacrificing, in this case, one person. So the problem is that no one wants to be a treasurer for the campaign anymore because they are frightened, because finally they can suffer the consequences.
Bien, sin haber esta intervención, y como el moderador nadie lo modera.
So if there are no more interventions, and as I am the facilitator, I am going to give the final resolution of the table. And I will mention some of the issues that have been mentioned. I think that it is very interesting, all the issues that have been mentioned here during this debate, and specifically I would like to point out the possibility of using new technologies in order to be able to assure that money in politics is kept for the original purposes. And I go back to one of the reflections that at the beginning of this talk I was telling you, like about the bitcoins. Bitcoin is a currency which has been created by some internet users. That is an algorithm which is worth $7,400. And the strength of this currency is the number of verifications that are done to their validity process, and a chain which is called the blockchain, which prevents to use the bitcoins twice or more at the same time. If we follow a scheme or an outline where the accounting of the political stakeholders was closed by this kind of black accounting, where they have to be checked before being authorized, we can rescue in some way the expenditure of this funding. And one of the initiatives what was set forth by the magistrates from Uruguay is to have an independent controller within the internal bodies of the political parties that are managing the funding. I mean, this seems natural for me. And the mechanism could be, and rounding the idea, would be to create accounting books that was digitally or electronically supervised by the authority, and that the comptroller verified, and before making any expenditures, they could pass through a black control chain in order to prevent that this money is coming from illicit sources, or that their destination was masked. And the last topic is people being unhappy with the money that is used to fund politics. This is like life insurance. Unfortunately, many people do not buy these kind of insurances because even though, people think it's going to be a long time until I die. So if there is some persuasion for politics funding, and that the citizens know that this is the ideal mechanism to obtain clean, transparent, useful elections, and for the aim that they were designed for, undoubtedly, we would invest much more resources, as it's done by thousands of Mexican people and Latin American people on a daily basis, to cover first need items. The truth is that we have to work as electoral authorities in order to convince people to do this and to achieve this clear line of thought, because it's much more expensive not to know where is this money coming from. So thank you very much for your time, and we have finished exactly at 2:30 as scheduled. Thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon, and have a very good evening. Thank you very much to all the members of the panel, and we invite all the participants to go for lunch that is going to be given at the central patio of this Centro de Convenciones. Panel 3, Electoral Justice before Uses and Customs of Indigenous People, is going to begin at 3:30 sharp. Thank you very much.